Hi, this is Kevin Trainer, and I'd like to welcome you to my lecture on Chapter 2 of the Murach MySQL text. And as you can see here, I have the slides up that go with Chapter 2, but essentially this is a demo chapter. And so you can feel free to follow along with the slides if you have access to a copy, which you should if you're in my class. And instead of showing you the slides, I'm actually going to perform the demo. Okay, so the demo is going to be performed with MySQL Workbench. And here I'm doing this particular demo on Windows 7 with MySQL Workbench 6.3. And I had set up an icon in my taskbar. Alternatively, I could have gone down to Start, All Programs, MySQL, and there's the link for Workbench. Now, there's a question of what version of the various MySQL products you're going to be using and how that compares with what I'm going to be using, and also how that compares with what's in your textbook. So the current version of the textbook, the second edition, was the author was using MySQL Community Edition 5.6, and they were using a version of MySQL Workbench of a similar age. Right now, I am using a copy of these tools, which I've installed on Windows 7. And I'm a version ahead on Community Server. I'm at 5.7. And I think I'm at least a version or two ahead on the Workbench. And this is, at the time that I record this, this is the same version that I'm showing students how to install with my tutorial demo. As time goes by, I'm going to revise my tutorial demo and show you newer versions to install. So the difference between the textbook and what you're going to be using could become greater. There's also a difference between what I'm recommending that people use on the Mac and what I recommend that people use on Windows, because in recent months, the latest version does not run properly on the Mac. And this is the way things are with free tools. So the versions are going to be a little different. So if you see little differences between this and your textbook or this and the way things work on your machine, you'll know why. You should be able to adapt everything that you're learning here. So the first thing that we want to be able to do is that we want to be able to connect between the MySQL Workbench, which is a client application, and MySQL Community Server, which is the database server application. And I'm going to show you the easiest way to do that. I've already created a connection. That's what this gray page-like icon is. So I'm going to click on that, and I'm going to simply connect. Okay? And okay, what if you don't have that? How do you get yourself to that point? Well, probably if you're not at that point yet, when you log in, you're not going to have any connection at all. or you may have one that is not fully configured. So you would go up here in the top right where, to the right of where it says MySQL Connections and click on the plus icon, and you get into the dialog for setting up a new connection. And we're actually pretty close to having a connection properly set up just from the default values that come up. Now we have to put in a connection name. So I'm just going to call this Chapter 2 Demo, okay, because that's what this is. The name of the host is specified as an IP address, and this 127.0.0.1 is the IP address which always refers to the machine that you're on. This is also sometimes referred to as local host. So the server should be on your machine, just like this one is on my virtual machine that I'm running the demo on. And the port is 3306. This is the typical port on which we configure MySQL Community Server to listen for traffic intended for it. The username is root. Now, in the long-term use of a product like this, we wouldn't recommend that you use it as the root user. That makes you kind of a super user. But given the fact that we're running a personal copy on our personal computer, a lot of these security features are not as important. So it's okay to say that we have the username root, because that'll give us really carte blanche to do more or less everything that we'd like. The only thing that we're missing right now is a password. Okay, so as soon as we take some action, it's going to ask us for a password. So the action I typically take is I click the button for test connection, and it says, oh, what's your password? Now, when you installed Community Server, hopefully you used a simple password. Joel Murach in the book, I think he recommends that you use Sesame a la Aladdin in the Magic Lamp. I have a different one that I use that I'm not going to share with you. And I'm just going to click on OK. Okay? You will notice that here there's a checkbox for Save Password in the Vault. If I click on this, then it's not going to ask me for the password every time. So, in a production environment where I was using these tools for my work, I probably would not want to save my password. Okay? That probably would not be a good security practice. In a learning environment like this, it's a great idea, because then you're not having to remember your password every time you go to log on to your own little copy of MySQL. So I'm going to click on that and say OK. And you can see here that I had a successful connection. All right, that's good. Now, let me just fool with it a bit. So I'm going to cancel this. Okay. Oh, I didn't actually create it. So let me try again. Let me try an unsuccessful connection. So again, I'm going to call it Chapter 2 Demo. Okay. And test the connection. Well, that works fine. What if I tried the wrong host name? What if I tried, well, let's try something like oracle.com. Is that going to work? No, it's not going to. Okay, so let's go back. What if instead of 127.0.0.1 I used its alias? What if I tried localhost? I think that'll work. Let's see. Test connection. Yeah, that works just fine. So local host and 127.0.0 point 1 is are the same thing. What if I tried another port? What if instead of 3306 I tried 3307? Is that going to work? No, that's not going to work. You have to use the exact port that your server is listening on, which is 3306. That's the default install. Okay, so let's do that. Ah, that worked. What if I just wanted to store the password in the vault to begin with? Well, I could just click on Store in Vault and put in my password. So that's going to be stored there forever. Okay, now when I test the connection, it's not going to ask me for the password. Okay, when I'm finally done with all this stuff, I'm going to click on OK. And there's my Chapter 2 demo. Okay, now that's going to persist. So if I close this client application and I open it again, you're going to see that I have that as one of my connection opportunities. And that's the one I'm going to use. If I click on that, then I'm going to connect. It takes a minute, but now I'm connected. All right. So that's how you create a new connection, and that's how you fire it up. And again, I'm going to recommend that you save your password there during this class because we are in a low security mode. Not a good long-term practice, but an efficient short-term while we're in this class practice. Okay, now certain versions of this Mysql Workbench are good for controlling the server. Now, I'll just tell you that the version that I'm using that runs on my Mac right now is not good at that at all. So on my Mac, when I want to start and set up the server, I have to go to the upper left-hand corner and click on the Apple icon and then System Preferences, and then I pick the MySQL logo, and then I come into a dialog for starting and stopping the server. Now, why can't I do that from within Workbench? Well, that feature wasn't working quite well on the version that I currently have installed on my Mac. Let's see if it's working on this version I have installed on my Windows virtual machine. So, okay, on the left-hand side, there's the navigator panel where we can pick various functions that we want to do. And the second grouping in here says instance. An instance is an instance of MySQL server. We have one instance that is connected to our connection. So we want to go to Startup Shutdown. And we can see that it says it's running. And there's a button to stop the server. Well, I'm pretty sure it's running. I mean, that makes sense for me because if it wasn't running, we couldn't connect to it. So if it was not running and we went to connect, we would fail to connect. Now, this Windows version of this feature, sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. Let's give it a try here. Click on Stop Server, and it's going to tell me it's checking the status. But it doesn't really stop the server. Let's go down and refresh the status. Currently running. So I've had this trouble on this particular version recently. I didn't have it before. Perhaps it was some operating system update that I did. What I typically do in the Windows environment is when I need to stop and start the server. Let's see, there's probably a way to do it over here. So let's go find MySQL, and Mysql Utilities. Let's look. Mysql Utilities console. Nope, that's not it. So I'm not seeing a good spot to do it. Let's look again. Server command line. Well, we could use the command line client, but I don't want to do that. And the utilities doesn't really look very promising either. Nope, not going to work. So if you can't get this start and stop feature to work, remember that once you have the product installed on Windows, it is installed as a service. So when you shut down Windows, it will shut down the server. When you boot up Windows, it will boot up the server. So when you come to this feature that we're looking at now, it should be running. So your workaround in the short run here is just to reboot your Windows operating system in order to get this to reboot. And I apologize for that, but this is just what you get with free products. Okay, so hopefully we're going to do a little better as we go forward with this demonstration. Okay, now this is a database server, so let's go look at it that way. Let's close these tabs that are in the kind of the worker portion of our product. Okay, and let's do some interesting stuff here. This middle panel is most frequently taken up with the Sql Script Editor. And how do we get a new copy of the editor? Well, there's a toolbar here, and the first one has a plus sign over an SQL document, and that gets that for us. And then how do you know which database we are working with? Well, if we go over to the navigator, every database has a schema, and we can see we have a bunch of schemas associated with databases here. And this hasn't been cleaned up since I taught last semester, so we have a lot there. But there are three that come with our textbook, and then they are AP, which is the accounts payable database, EX and OM, which are other databases which we don't particularly use but come with our textbook. Okay, so let's double click on AP. That's how we tell the product to use the AP database. Sorry about that. I accidentally hit a key. So let's double click, and there we are. So we have a list of things to drop down, and there are tables. If we click that little triangular icon, it will expand a list. And we'll see that there are a little bit more than a handful of tables that make up the AP database. Again, AP is for accounts payable. And I can't see the full name, so I'm just going to pull this bar over so I got a little bit more room. Okay. Alrighty. So let's go and pick a table and see if we can see the data for it. So let's pick vendors, okay? And we're going to highlight the row for that table. And if we right click and pick the very top option, select row limit 1000, a couple of things happened. Over here in the query editor, it actually authors a quick query for us to select all the columns from the vendors table in the AP schema. And now we see a result set. Okay, so this page control down here shows the answers or the result set that came from the query. And we can see we have a bunch of rows. We can't see them all, so if we pull to the right, we'll see the rest of the rows. That looks good. Okay, and then we can also pull this slider down and see all the, when I said the rows, I meant the columns. I apologize for that. So when we were scrolling to the right, we were seeing more columns. Okay, and then when we scroll down, we see the rest of the rows. So we have rows and columns. So there are 123 rows in the vendors table, which means probably there are 123 distinct vendors in this accounts payable application. Now, is this the only way to say we want to look at all the data in the table? No, there isn't. So we're going to close this tab. And let's go over and let's look at this vendors row. And if you look, there are very light icons off to the right of it. And I for information, a wrench for settings, and kind of a table for data tables. So if we take the last one, if we click on the data table, we'll see that we do the same thing. So it's not uncommon with this kind of product that we've got more than one way to trigger a feature in the user interface. Okay, so let's say that we're in a data column and a data view like this, and we want to change the data that's in the table. First of all, is this a common use case? Well, no. Okay. Most of the people who are using applications that use relational database are going to be using a custom programmed application, probably one that runs on a web application server. And those people are going to be interacting with the web application. And the web application is going to be interacting with the database server. And so they're not really going to be interacting with the database as a database per se. Well, who does? Well, two groups of people. Group one, people like the people in our class, people who want to learn how to use SQL databases directly. Well, what kind of people do that? Well, one group are kind of power users. These are people who use the relational database as a relational database. It's not as friendly as the custom-built application, but for them, and they really think of the database as a database, no problem. So that's what you're going to be by the end of the class. The other group are people who are programmers, who are going to build applications, maybe those web server applications that we talked about, and they're going to have to know how to write the SQL. Now, the power users might want to put data directly into a table. They might want to edit one of the rows. They might want to insert a new row. They might want to delete a row because they don't have any other means to do it. The programmer might want to do that as part of their testing. Okay? But the average user is probably not going to be using a client like this. They're going to be using their browser and talking to a full-blown web application. All right, so let's say you are doing this. How could you do it? Well, let's say we want to edit something. So let's take this vendor ID for job track, and let's click on it a second time and change the name to Job Track Services Limited. Okay, and let's tab off of it. Okay, as soon as we tab off of it, we can come down to the lower right and click apply. So let's click apply. Now, this is a really cool graphical tool because it, on one hand, it allows us to use a graphical user interface to say what changes we would like to make into the data in the database. On the other hand, it shows us the SQL statements it's about to execute to make that happen. Well, that's just the kind of thing we'd have to learn how to do if we were a programmer creating a web application. So what does it do when we're doing some kind of an update? It issues an update. So if I click apply, then it applies it, said yes, it came back okay, and I click finish, and we've actually changed the data. Okay? I can also, let's say I highlight that line, I can come up and click this plus icon to say I want to insert a new row. We insert new rows at the bottom, so it took me to the bottom. So I can put all the fields in here, and then I can go through apply, and the only thing we have to remember is we have this thing called referential integrity. So for instance, if there's a relationship between the table that we're in and another table, and one of our columns is really a foreign key that points to a row in another table, well, it had better point to a real row. Okay? So I'm not going to fool with this, but if we filled this out all right and we said apply, we would be shown the insert statement, and then if we continued on, we'd actually do the insert. And the same for a delete. Let's say we want to delete Unical. So we highlight it and we would click on the delete icon. Okay. And then it disappears from the user interface, but it's not gone from the database yet. So if we click on the apply button in the lower right, here you can see the statement that's about to be sent to the server. Okay. And if I want to delete it, I have to click on, I would click on apply. Now I'm probably going to get into trouble here because there are probably there may be an invoice for this vendor, but let's see. Let's click on apply. Well, that worked just fine. Okay. And now we say finish. Now, I think before I tried Sql Design in another demo, and I tried to delete that, and it wouldn't allow me because there was an invoice for it. So let's try to delete that. Apply this. Here's the delete that it's about to send to the server. I say apply. Oh, it doesn't like that because I can't get rid of the vendor if I have an invoice in the invoice table that's pointing to this row in the vendor table. So I couldn't do it. Okay? So I tried to do that. You don't see Zilka there anymore. That's why we have a revert button. So this resets the user interface to agree with what's actually in the database. And you can see we didn't really get rid of Sql Design, but we got rid of the other one. So this is a kind of a crude content editing function for the database. You can do it a table at a time. Some of the power users would use something like this. The other people who would use it would be, say, programmers who were doing this for testing. I'm going to ask you to use it when you do your end of course project, because that's how you're going to put the data into your test database. you're going to use these features of Mysql Workbench. Okay, so we can do some other operations on tables. So let's pick another table. Let's pick invoices. Okay, and the other operation that we can do would be to essentially look at the properties of the table. So if we right click on the line that has the table and pick alter table, we're going to come to this view, which shows us all of the columns that are defined for that table and essentially their properties. Okay, the other way to bring this up, let me close this tab. The other way to bring this up is to come down and hover over the table invoices and pick the second icon, the one with the wrench. That's going to bring us to the same place. So what kind of things could we do? Well, let's see this. Let's just add a field. So let's come down to the bottom. Let's add a column. Click in the bottom. And so let's call this some silly col. And let's go here. And let's say it is a date. And let's say that it's not allowed to be null. Okay. And this has the same kind of user interface that the data editor had. We go to the bottom right, we click on apply. Now it shows us the SQL. This is a different part of the SQL. This is from the data definition language that controls the creation and the maintenance of the structure of the tables. And you can see that we have an alter table statement here. And if we click apply, then it's actually going to change the structure of the table. Now that's a pretty significant thing to do. That's something we'd want to be doing in the very beginning of our project when we're getting the table just right. But we probably would not want to be doing that if we had a lot of data in the table. Okay, so I'm just going to cancel that. Okay, and then I'm going to click revert. Okay, so that's going to put the graphical user interface is going to agree now with what's in the database server. Okay, so the main event for people who are using a database is typically to get answers out of it, and we generally do that with SQL the statements that we call queries, and they begin with the keyword select. So let's look at yet another table. Let's look at the terms table. All right, and let's look at the columns that are there. So we can say there's a terms ID, there's a terms description, and a terms due days. Okay, so what could we do? Let's go up in the editor. We have a blank editor tab. Okay, if we didn't have that yet, let's say we close this, we could go over to the toolbar icon and say, click on the first of the icons, the plus with the SQL. Okay, and then we type select, and we're going to use asterisk, all columns. And this little silly one is disobeying again. I don't know why. Sometimes I have trouble with this when I run it in my virtual machine. I apologize for that. Select uh, asterisk all columns from, and this is called terms. And I already typed it, and now it showed up. All right. And what we're going to do is we're going to click on this left of the two lightning bolt buttons, and this is going to execute our query. And there it is. So we have all the columns for the table terms. So we're seeing all the columns and all the rows. So this is a typical select. Okay. Now it's possible to have multiple statements in a script, because this is a script editor. So let's say our second one said select oh, that's a silly one again. Gosh, am I having a heck of a time with this thing. Okay, select all from vendors. Okay, so let's just look at these two lightning bolt icons. The lightning bolt icon on the right has a little I-beam, and that usually means that we're selecting something. So if we put our cursor over top of the second select, and we click on this one with the I-beam, it's going to execute the statement under the cursor. So there we go, we got the vendors. And of course, if we did this, we go back to the first one, and we click that lightning bolt with the I-beam, and we do the first one. The second, the one on the left, and that's the one that I prefer, it will either run all of the statements in the script, or if there that's if no portion of it is selected, or if you select a portion, it will run only the selected portion. So with nothing selected, I'm going to run the left lightning bolt. And it really ran both of these. So it ran the terms, and then it ran the vendors, and the one on top is now the vendors. Okay, so that did that. If I highlight the first one, the query for terms, and click on the leftmost of the lightning bolts, then it's going to run terms. If I highlight this statement for the second one and click on the left plain lightning bolt, it's going to do that. And if I happen to select a word that's not a full SQL statement and click on that same icon, it will try to execute it, and that will give me an error. Now this is a common mistake for me because I'm trying to show students that, for instance, we're interested in the vendors table, and I'll highlight it and then I'll click it and I'll get an error, and then I'll have to go, oh, what I really meant to do was to highlight the whole statement and then click the lightning bolt on the left. So that's how we execute the statements with the two lightning bolt related icons. There's another feature which I don't personally use all that often, and it uses the panel over here on the right side. Now, the panel over on the right side is called Sql Editions. And I think the functionality over here works a little different on the version I'm using on my Mac and the version that I use here on Windows. And maybe that's why I'm a little bit timid with it. But the most interesting parts is the right tab within the panel. So there's context help is the left tab, and it says it's not really enabled. And then we click on the right one, snippets, and that is enabled. Okay. And what we can do is we can go up in My Snippets and we can pick any category of SQL statement, including something like DML statements. And then we can say, okay, we want to get the code for the select syntax. Okay. Now, if we really want to see the way all the options for a select, we can double click. And now you can see all the possible things that could go into a select. Okay. Or we could just say that we have this and we want to insert this. Let's see, if we use the one that has the up arrow, it, I think, replaces what's in the editor. Yeah, that all goes in there. Okay, and let's use the Control Z to back that up. Okay, so I undid that. Or if I were to just take a part of this, I was to just say the word select, and then I came over here and I clicked on that. Oh, it doesn't work. If I just do that and then I do this, nope, I get the whole thing. Okay, if I just want to take a part of it, I need to cut and paste. So when I do the leftmost one, I replace all the current text with that. When I do the one in the middle, I just insert the snippet where over top of what I've selected. And if I do the rightmost one, I can copy the snippet text to the clipboard. Okay? So again, I'm not super handy with this, but you can work at it. This is particularly good. I see two use cases. One is where you don't remember the syntax of a statement, and you kind of go, oh God, I've got to get my book out. No, you don't have to get the book out. You can go look, see how does an insert work, do the double click. Oh yeah, here are all the values, and you can either use it to refresh your memory, or you could, for instance, take this and insert all of the text that could possibly go into an insert into your editor, and then pick the things that you want and get rid of the things that you don't. So that's use case one. Use case two are situations where you have a group of queries that you're trying to author, and they have some common bits that you want to copy from one to the next. You could take a certain phrase from one, turn it into your own custom snippet, and then from there you could copy it back into the others as you author them. Again, this isn't a feature I use a lot, but it has some promise if you want to take the time to get good at it. We have syntax errors. Okay, so let's go back. Let's clear off all the editors. Okay. Let's say we don't want to save that. And let's get up a new SQL script tab. And let's say something like this. Let's say that we say we want to select asterisk all the columns from the table doodle. Well, that might work if there were a table doodle in my database, but right now we can tell over in the Navigator panel I'm in the AP database because that's what's in bold. Okay, so if I go to run that, well, it's not going to like it. It says table AP dot doodle does not exist. Okay. Let's say, okay, let's fix that. We've got one called terms. All right, so if we ran that, it would run okay. But let's say instead of select, we hit D, and now it says delect. Well, is that going to work? No, that's going to give us a syntax error as well. And it says you have an error in your SQL syntax. Okay, so what kind of things could go wrong? Well, here are the kind of things you have. Maybe you have selected the wrong database. Maybe you misspelled the name of the table or the column. Maybe you misspelled a keyword. Or even something, there are a number of SQL statements that include a character string in quotes. And maybe we didn't put quotes on both ends. Okay? These technical products are very literal. You have to tell them exactly what they're looking for, or either they don't hear you, which is kind of the response that we're getting here, or they think you're asking it to do something else. So you really need to do something pretty significant. If you can't see the message, you can hover over it. Let me get back in this window. You can hover over it and you'll see it. The other thing you can do is you can highlight the line. Here's one we have error code 1146. You can highlight the line, right click, and say copy response. Okay, and that's going to take your error message, and here you can take it and paste it into any kind of editor. I'm going to open up WordPad and paste it into WordPad. There are times when the error message is so long I can't see it down there, and I just need to get a good look at the whole thing. And so again, how do I do it? Well, I come down here, I highlight the line, I right click on that, and then I say copy response. You kind of have to know that because that's not what the column's called in this version. In one version it was called a response, but now it's called message. I think in my Mac version that column's called response. And then again, I can go to the editor and I can paste it in. Okay, so that's a great way to find your way to the messages. If you don't have any hint, okay, you can take something like this, error code 1064, and maybe copy that and bring up a browser. And then I might do a search where I might say MySQL, and then I'm going to paste error code 1064 and see what I get. And well, I don't know, we have some ideas. So this idea, and a place where you get a lot of good ideas, is a blog, technical blog called Stack Overflow. So you might come in here and get some good ideas as to what you did wrong. If you don't have any ideas yourself, that might be a good way to do it. Okay? So let me close all those bits. Okay. Not going to save them. And let's talk about the next thing that we want to do. We want to be able to open up a script file. I mean, these scripts are fine, but of course you're not going to want to type one in all the time, right? At a certain point you're going to want to save them, and then you're going to want to be able to open them and run them. So there are a lot of scripts that come with our book, and if you properly install the files, you'll be able to find them where I'm going to find this. So I'm going to go up to the toolbar line, and I'm going to pick the open SQL, the SQL, the open folder. So that's going to open up the dialog. Okay. Or alternatively, I could go up to the menu and click on File, Open Sql Script. Those get you to the same place in the dialog. And if you install the files the way you were instructed, if you go to Computer and Local Disk, you should have a directory called Murach, and within that, MySQL, and then within that, we ought to have a DB setup. Well, that's interesting. Here are a bunch of scripts that come with the textbook that set up and populate the sample databases. So I'm going to highlight create databases, which is the main one that runs them all. Click on Open. Okay. And now here, without anything highlighted or selected, I'm going to click on the left lightning bolt icon. I'm going to rerun the database setup, and what I'm going to have is I got rid of, if you look down in schemas, the 3 sample databases that come with the book. They've all of a sudden, the schemas have disappeared. If you look up here where the title schemas is, off to the right there's a refresh button, and you can see that we've gotten new copies of the sample scripts. Okay, now what other things can we do with this? Well, let's say we create a script of our own, and I created a new one there, and I could say select all from invoices. Okay, whoop, not period, but semicolon. There it is. It showed up. And I'm going to run that query. Oh, and it's going, I don't know what table you mean, because it's currently thinking that I'm in the schema or the database OM. Well, no, I'm not. I want to be in AP. So let's go. I have 2 alternatives. Okay. The alternative that I like the best, and the one that I'm going to recommend for your assignments, is always have a statement in the beginning of your script that says what database to use. Use AP. That will always work. The other thing that you could do would be to come over and double click on AP. Okay, well, that will only work when we're using this particular tool, whereas this script with the use AP will work no matter what tool we're using to submit the script. Okay, so we have this. Let's give that a run. That worked just fine. Okay, so if I wanted to save this, how would I do it? Well, I'd go up to the menu and I'd click on File and Save Script. And I don't want to put it with all those other ones, but let's say that we want to have a new folder and call it Chapter 2 Demo. Okay, so let's open that and double click that. And then let's say we want to save this as script 1. Okay, so now that's been saved. Okay, all right, let's see if we're able to bring it back. We're going to close it. Let's do an open. I like to use the toolbar. Okay, so we could use this second toolbar icon here, or you could come up here, File, Open Sql Script, and it took us right back to the directory you were into before. Highlight Script 1, click on Open, and there you are. Okay, and let's say we want to change this. And so instead of showing all from invoices. Let's show all from vendors. Okay. And then let's do a save as. Okay, so let's go up to the menu, File, Save Script As, call it Script 2. That wasn't what I wanted. Script 2. It's going to put on the .sql for us. We don't have to do that. Okay, so now if you look in the tab, you can see that we're currently on Script 2. So, and again, I hit some mouse button here that caused this to shrink, which is a part of how you control this application that I have no idea how that works. Okay. Now I want to show you a couple of more things before we go. How to switch between open files. Well, this is pretty easy stuff. So we've got Script 2 open. Okay. Let's open Script 1. I'm going to go up and use the toolbar icon. So we click on this, open Script 1. And if I want to be working in Script 1, I stay on that tab. If I want to go to Script 2, I go on that tab. If I want to copy paste, well, I could take all of the text from Script 2, do Control C to copy it, go into Script 1, do a Control V to paste it, and well, that didn't work. Let's try that again. So let's right click and say copy, and let's go to Script 1 and let's right click and say paste. Hopefully that'll work a little better. Yeah, that worked there. Okay, and then whenever you're on an editor tab that has not had its current contents saved, there is a little asterisk at the end of the file name. Okay, I'm going to close this without saving, in which case it's going to say, do I want to save? No. This Script 2, I don't have any pending changes, so when I go to close it, it just simply closes. You are probably interested in finding the manual for MySQL. Okay, and how do we find that? Well, in the slides there's a link. Okay, and let me just close Workbench and open a open Firefox. So in the slides we have the URL HTTP, so it's dev mysql.com doc refman. Aren't we having a time? So again, this is not a problem with the product, but more just the interface of my virtual machine today. Refman 5.6 EN. Okay, and here's the manual for 5.6. Now, when they created the slides, it was for 5.6. Okay, and this has all kinds of things, including tutorials. One of the things that you're probably the most interested in is Sql Statement Syntax. And then we have all the statements by category right here. what if we were really using 5.7? Well, not lots of differences that we're going to learn about, but we could just go up to that URL and turn the 6 into a 7, and it turns out that that's the way there is a URL for that as well. Okay, so there we are. Not bad, huh? Okay, a couple more things and we'll let you go. In the slides, they show us how to use the old style client. Okay, so there is a command line client for MySQL, and it's actually a program called MySQL, and it runs out at the command line. We're not going to make a lot of use of it in this course, but I do just want to show it to you. So the easiest way to get this to work on Windows is to go down to Start and go to All Programs. And then under MySQL, you have to open up the subfolder for the server. And then there are two lines for the command line client. The first one happens to work with the Unicode character set. The second one works with just the, so that's the top one. That's typically the one I want, okay? And then it wants to know the password. Again, my simple password. Okay. Now you can see in the text or in the slides the way to get the command line tool to run in say on a Mac. Okay, so we'll let you discover that on your own if you're a Mac user and you want to explore this tool. But what are some of the things that we could do? Well, let's just do a couple. So let's do show databases. So show databases. Okay, and this is the same kind of output that we would get if we did that in MySQL Workbench. It's just all more character-based, not as graphical. Okay, and let's look at a couple of other things. Let's look at, let's say that we want to use AP for the accounts payable database changed. And then let's say something like select vendor name from vendors, limit 5. And we get 5 rows from the vendors database. When you want to get out of this command line tool, you can type either exit or quit. I'm going to use exit this time, and now it's gone. So this is an old style tool. Okay. There probably are a few things that you can do in it that you cannot do with the Workbench tool. But for the things we're going to do in this class, at least 99.9% of them, you can do them in the Workbench tool. And it's the modern way to do things, and it's a way that I recommend. So that's it. Again, I want to remind you that depending upon the software that you've installed and the operating system that you're using, things might be just a little different, but not much. And you may need to adapt exactly what you've seen here in the demonstration to your particular circumstances. But the general capabilities, look and feel, etc. are going to be the same. And with that, I'm going to say bye until next time. Bye-bye.